This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. It is I, Old Gingerface, here with you as always. Thank you for being here, guys. Thank you for all the new subscribers and listeners. I really appreciate that. A lot of people coming over from the Sergeant Steve YouTube channel, which is awesome. That channel's been doing like wildly well. There's over 300,000 subs on there now. I've said it before. I'll say it again. It's beyond my wildest dreams how that channel took off. It was so cool. And the awesome part is it's people are finding the podcast and they're really liking the long form audio stuff, which is really the reason I got into even doing any of this stuff anyway. So it's really a win-win for me. So thank you for that. And I will say, if you do listen to the show and you check out Sergeant Steve YouTube channel, please subscribe, hit the subscribe button. Not just saying that like to get more subscribers, there's plenty, but because there's kind of a weird 72-hour shadow ban on the channel where the videos post, but they don't release to the public for 72 hours. So if you're not subscribed, you won't get the video right away, or maybe not at all. So subscribe and hit the bell notification. We don't know why it's happening, but body cam footage it's a dicey endeavor. We have to do a lot of blurring and be very careful about subject matter. And there's no strikes on the channel, but they have decided that we need to be under this dissent decree of YouTube. So we're being watched. So if you could do that, that would be excellent. Very excited for today's guest. Comes from a gigantic police agency. I think, definitely the largest police agency in the country. I think it's like bigger than the Coast Guard. This gentleman is retired from the great NYPD, did 20 years. He was in patrol. He was a detective. He worked in the special operations. He is now director of new product development for Mira Safety. He's also an instructor and speaker to resilience and mental health matters. Without further ado, let me bring on the great George Sichler. George.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, brother.
All right.
Thank you for coming on, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so when I joined the police department, they did say that we were larger than the U.S. Coast Guard. And at the time, at its peak of 40 or 42,000 in my career, we were the 8th largest standing army in the world.
It's crazy, man. I was always I've always worked at smaller agencies, so I've never been part of like a big show. For LAPD, I did backgrounds, but I was a civilian. I wasn't like a cop there. So I got to work with the cops, which was cool, but I've never been part of an agency that large. And I've had guests on in the past that talk about like the undercover NYPD cops they have in mosques, like overseas. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're like a damn letter alphabet agency.
Yes. So what I will say, there's a couple of things they'll say. That number one, our biggest strength could also be our biggest weakness. Okay. So it's like turning an aircraft carrier around when chains need to be made. It can be very, very challenging. We do have a very lowest common denominator, and it pains me to see my agency become the butt of many of those memes. But what I will say is that when we get to that above lowest common denominator, that what you're referring to is the intelligence division, the international liaison program, very robust. And the amount of technology and resources and the talent that's in a lot of these not patrol aspects is significant. And I think that's kind of what I like to remember back as what my department is and was. Sure, patrol is the backbone of the department, and it's difficult to get police officers these days to want to take that job. But when you look at the robust resources that department has, it is pretty significant.
Yeah, it's really impressive. And you're right. You're 100% right. It is like steering a battleship. I remember I'm a firearms guy myself, firearms instructor. So, I get the magazines and all that, talk to instructors from other states. And it's like, everybody's going to 9mm, then to 40, then back to 9. And NYPD is just kind of like, we have to get from 38s to 9mm, but we need 40,000 of them. And we need to train 40,000 people to have these new handguns. So it's not like a 15 or 20 man agency where you can get this done in like a weekend. It's like, if you change anything at that agency, it's a huge, huge costly endeavor to do anything.
Yeah, from a training standpoint, yes. And it's exactly what you said. It's like, if they mandate some training, that department has to figure out, how do we put 40,000 people through this over the next 6 months, year, or even 2 years, right? It takes, and you think about, manpower, et cetera. I have no idea how they figure out the logistics for that kind of thing. But it's it could be a nightmare. And just think about too, like every year, there's the New Year's Eve detail, there's the Thanksgiving Day parade, there's the Christmas tree lighting, there's
Crazy
the July
money.
4th, all of these different things that they crank out year after year after year. It's an entity unto itself.
I remember I went to simunitions instructor school, and there was a guy who had worked at NYPD, and he's like he said when they did simunitions training, they basically to shut down a city block. They use these old buildings, and it was just like 10 hours a day, just cops going through. The guns, I mean, we were like, oh man, these guns jam a lot when they get dirty. He's like, this is nothing. He's like, imagine just these guns going off for 10 hours a day for a month. That's
so a day tour in a 4 to 12, and you're referring to Rodman's Neck, the quote unquote tactical village, which was built by the Army Corps of Engineers. And it was to simulate a city block. I think they tore that one down. I think they might have added a new one over the last year or two, or 2 or 3 years. But it was basically 5 and 6 story walk-ups, apartment buildings, a city block with a bus, different streets, etc. And then again, like,
so cool.
Exactly what you said is, you would maybe get the first 1 or 2 rounds out of that simunition firearm, and then you had some sort of a malfunction you had to do. And it's that checkbox training that you have to do. And then, in my opinion, as an instructor, and it creates those training scars, right? Where you're going to say, okay, I anticipate a magazine change or some sort of a phase 1 or phase 2 malfunction. It's an issue because they have all of those tools, right? Those training aids. And then in order to maintain them at the level they need to be maintained at, that's where they cut it off, because it's going to cost them money to always have those things in a proper working order. Like when I bought them as an instructor after retired, right? Like I would have to maintain them because people are paying for me to teach them and come to a class. We want it to be as realistic as possible, but that's one of those things where now, okay, we'll go lowest common denominator and cut that thread at the maintenance aspect of it. It's an issue.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, it's I've talked to guys who worked there before, and they're like, yeah, you could get into a car, like if you're new and you're just getting crappy cars, like, oh, let me get the fire extinguisher for this vehicle fire. No fire extinguisher. There's no first aid kit in the car. There's really nothing in there. It's just an empty jalopy, and you're like, damn, I don't have any of the stuff I'm supposed to have.
I don't know if any of, again, it's an entity unto itself. And if you ever got into a vehicle where for whatever reason, the foam on the steering wheel is just gone because people picked at it, for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's just a metal ring.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that takes place in other places, but that, I guess, really makes the NYPD what it is. And we're going to give you a hammer and a screwdriver and go tell you to change the oil in that car. And that's where the talent comes in for people to be like, these aren't the right tools, but I'm going to figure out a way to get it done. And I can say that, with some conviction that I think that happens pretty often.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. And you guys produce some of the best cops in the world. So it's quite the thing in and of itself.
Numbers wise, we just have to.
Yeah.
Just numbers wise, we have to, right? Mathematically, that'll happen.
That's like when you play the neighboring town that their high school has 10,000 kids and yours has 2,000. It's like, yeah, their football team's going to kill us. They all look like our dads. They're going to kill us. George, can you tell us about your first hot call you responded to, the first call that gave you like that adrenaline dump?
Yes. So I will go all the way back to 1998. We were actually still in the police academy, and what our department does and did, I think, still, they'd send you out to field training for 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever it was. So you're basically still in your recruit uniform, but you get assigned to any one of the 72, 75 precincts across the city. So we got assigned to the 6-7 precinct in East Flatbush, my academy class of 30, 35 recruits. My entire class, right, that year, 1998, we had 3,000 recruits, but my 30 end up going to the 6-7 precinct. There was a guy in our class who had been a police officer somewhere else, a corrections officer. He was 6'3", 6'4". He was the big guy in the class, had experience. And they broke us up into doing 10 to 6, 10 a.m. to 6 a.m., 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. So he got assigned the earlier shift. I remember coming in at the change of tour, and he grabbed a handful of us that were friendly with him, and he said, listen, this place is no joke. You can die out here tonight. Okay. They sent us out to a foot post, and we were told not to look like recruits, because the neighborhood would recognize that and they would torment you.
Oh,
so
boy.
we wore a turtleneck, and the only thing that identified us as a recruit was those single shoulder patch. And we're walking out to our foot post, and the first thing that we get over the radio is a man with a gun, and we look at the address. Holy crap, that's where we're standing.
Oh, great.
And I remember him saying, listen, you can be killed out here tonight on your first shift. That happens. And then, everybody kind of comes, rushing over. And really what it turned out to be was the neighborhood recognized us as recruits. And that was kind of their way of initiating us, so to speak. So it turned out to be nothing.
Oh,
but it was
wow.
First day out. They said gun run on the street that we were on. They saw us walking. They saw the shoulder patch. We had no idea. And it was one of those typical culture shock, like, where am I? I grew up in the Bronx, not the South Bronx, very, very different. You need to have a head on your shoulders, but it wasn't kind of what you would see that Chicago, Miami, East LA, New York City, typical, rock'em sock'em type of neighborhood. That when we were recruits, that first night was absolutely that. And we didn't know, we didn't know heads or tails. And it was like, holy smokes, like, this is for real now,
Yeah, absolutely. So someone in the neighborhood called that in to screw with you guys, or
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, it was an unfounded call, but again, it was to get us to basically, skyrocket your adrenaline. And again, fortunately, it turned out to be nothing on that particular one. But that was literally my first day, my first call that we were recognized as being recruits, and the neighborhood said, "We're going to teach you a lesson."
So this is part of field training, or are you not graduated from academy yet at this point?
Correct. We were not graduated from the academy. So let's say our academy at the time was 8 months long. At month 6 or 7, they sent you out to what was called field training, right? You had your gun and shield, right? You had gotten that. And then you spent like the next 3 or 4 weeks in field training. And then you came back to the academy for about a month, right? To kind of talk about it, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. Then you would graduate, and then you went to your permanent command.
That's a cool idea. I don't hear of many places doing it like that, but it makes sense, especially for like, before we're going to like put our seal of approval on these guys, let them get a little taste just to make sure they don't want to, quit.
Yeah. I don't know if they still do that. They had done that historically for a long, long period of time, long after I was done. On the flip side, so my father was a cop in the 60s, and he was what they call the infamous class of, I think he was 67, where they hired them. They had the riots going on, and they basically did the same thing. They were recruits, and they sent them out on patrol onto the streets and never brought them back into the academy.
Oh,
The next class, the infamous class of 68, they hired them and sent them right out on the streets to the riots. So like, when you think how far, police training has come, it's pretty significant. But yeah, it was the infamous class of 68 that my father said that. And then when they tried to bring those basically Vietnam era veterans back, into the academy, they're like, dude, we've been out on the street for 6 months. You were hiding in the academy as an instructor. Like, what are you going to do to us now?
Yeah.
So I don't think they do that anymore, fortunately. But yeah, so that was my academy experience. About 8 months, 2/3 of the way through, you went out for a month, came back, and then you graduated and went out from there.
no kidding. Interesting. Yeah, I remember I did when I was taking the PAT test to be a cop up in Mass. There was a New York City cop there doing it with me, and he was young like me. He was maybe like 27, and he worked there for like 2 years, and he just didn't. He was on foot patrol a lot, he said, and he was on foot patrol. He said him and another kid, and they had a gas mask they had to carry, and it was after 9/11. And he said they would just literally take paper reports from people in the neighborhood. Just if someone broke into my apartment or whatever, they would just take paper reports and go back and type them up. And, sometimes they get a ride back from a cruiser. Sometimes they'd walk. It sounded like baptism by fire.
It was bare bones. I remember. So when I graduated, I ended up going to the 4-6 precinct in the South Bronx, which is the vicinity of Yankee Stadium. It's not the actual Yankee Stadium precinct, but like the next one north. So my precinct was 0.9 square miles. We had 300 cops assigned to the building, and that wasn't the gang squads, the ATF, the FBI, task force, all sorts of stuff. There's 300 people that answered 911 calls, right? Day tour.
Oh my gosh.
12, and midnight
for a square
shift.
mile.
For 0.9 square miles, 0.9 square miles. And I think in the late 80s, early 90s, the TV show America's Most Wanted dubbed that as the most dangerous square mile in America, kind of a moniker that we've kept. I don't think that's still the case anymore. I think some other places across the country will probably, take that torch.
Chicago.
Definitely. I mean, that 0.9 square miles, and we had 300 homicides in a year,
Oh my gosh.
maybe even 400 or 500, I think, at its peak during that America's Most Wanted time. But, you basically, it was exactly that. It was baptism by fire. You couldn't go anywhere without somebody else as a rookie. You got sent out to a foot post. And then you basically, figured it out from there. There's probably 10 or 12 of us in a rookie squad assigned to a training sergeant, and she would be in the car, and sometimes she'd take a couple, you throw you in the car and drive you around, and then you kind of, mix it around like that. But you just answered, calls on your foot post, and, we called it the well, 183rd Street. Because you could always go to the well and find an arrest. So they had, 6 of us in about 3 or 4 blocks, and you always be back to back with somebody. So you partner up, and then you just, sometimes you walk up to a roof and, watch a hand to hand and grab those people, or, a vertical patrol and, grab some people, or domestic violence, robberies, so you learn very quickly. The one thing that New York City will do, the volume of work that occurs, not everywhere across the country will say that they have that same volume of work. I think the type of work is the same, but the volume of work that you get is just really second to none. And we would do 30 radio runs a night with 2 people in a car, and that's, 10 or 12 cars we would turn out in 0.9 square miles. Every car is doing 30 jobs a night, just racing around like a ping pong ball back and forth.
Yeah, I bet the time flew though.
It did. Yeah, it did.
Yeah. I'd rather be
a meat grinder. It was a meat grinder.
Yeah.
It's one of those meat grinders where I don't know how people do it for the length of their career in places like that. I could never, and I didn't, I have to figure out a way to get out of here, at some point. It's a literal meat grinder.
Yeah. Those rare cops, just the road dog that does it for 35 years. And everybody's like, how is this guy doing this? Just loves it.
Yeah. Don't know.
George, can you tell us the strangest or most bizarre thing you dealt with for your years on the job?
I mean, it's just, it runs the gamut. I think the things that stick out to me, on patrol were, the typical domestic violence, the drug calls, et cetera. When I designated out of there and went to special operations, up the ante in that. And I saw a lot of, dismembered people, so to speak, from different, whether an aircraft crash in the water or a bridge jumper, that kind of thing. It was a different level. So, bizarre wise, I remember we had a guy, it was in our aircraft, guy jumps off of one of the big bridges in the city. And it's a 1 in a million shot where you actually survive. He survives. We deployed from the helicopter. We grab him, put him in the basket. We hoist back up into the ship, and then the crew chief's got handcuffed in there because he just tried to kill himself. Who's going to say he doesn't, want to kill everybody in the aircraft. So part of that team, you'll have to be medics as well. So my partner and I get into the aircraft, and then, the crew chief is still working with the pilot, et cetera, getting the gear in. So we triage the guy, and he says to us at that point, I also took pills, so he survived his his initial jump, which is like 1 in a million, and then he had pills inside of him, and I just thought of that was really one of the things that sticks out in my brain. Then we put the aircraft down in in the neighborhood right by the bridge, and then they take him off. But I have no idea whatever happened to him after that. But
Damn.
that was one of those. I was like, well, damn, man. Like, wow. You really stacked the cards against yourself on this one.
Yeah. he's got like a double kill myself protocol, and he failed at both. That's man, I never understood that. I mean, obviously I don't understand doing that anyways, because I'm like healthy and pretty normal. But if we're gonna do it, I mean, there's just like really quick and like painless ways to do it. Like being terrified while flying through the air is not like the last memory I'd want to have in this life, but obviously they're not.
I remember another guy. So it has to do with like terminal velocity, where you jump off of those bigger bridges in New York, and I forgot what the number is. It's called 180 feet or something, 80 feet. I don't remember what it was. But as a point that you hit terminal velocity, and the Brooklyn Bridge, depending on where you jump from, is below that. So like the Brooklyn Bridge is survivable, and some of those other bridges typically are not, right? That goes from borough to borough. We had another guy jumped off of the Brooklyn Bridge, and I remember as we were coming in to grab him, his head is above water. He puts his hand up, looks us in his face as he kind of just, went below the surface, and, then he was gone. But, it was almost one of those other people that was like, I wish I didn't do it, kind of thing. And he did not survive. So,
yeah, I imagine like a couple 100 feet up, the water's like cement when you hit it. I mean, there's no like gentle entry into that.
No. And like, so I can kind of, not without going down a, terrible, not suitable for work rabbit hole, but, when that happens, it's just like, the body does different things, it doesn't remain contained. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. I've heard that before. Very, very, very disturbing. We actually have a very, very high bridge, in the area that I work in, kind of in our abutting us, and they just put up these big, because it was like the number one bridge people would go to in the Northeast to do that, and they just put up like those big the big poles with that bend inward, so you can't like get over it. It really did just so a few years ago just had a little hip high guardrail forever, which also seemed crazy, but it has a beautiful view, and now it's all screwed up because of these people tossing themselves.
In my experience, if somebody calls 911 and you get to the scene and they're still on the bridge, they really don't want to die. It's the times that you get the 911 call, you show up there, the car is empty and they're gone, and they don't think about it. They just kind of go right away. So, that just my anecdotal experiences on that one. But, I don't want to see anybody do that, frankly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's terrible way to go. My goodness. George, can you tell us about your most intense or terrifying call?
I mean, there's so many. I think anybody in these professions, I think we all have quite a few. And I think there's one or two that stick out in my mind. Patrol days. I remember we were looking for a guy. It was a robbery came over. We were looking for a guy that had just done a robbery with a shotgun in a building. And I just remember the adrenaline really kind of pumping for that one. And then we made it in, we went up, started that up to the roof. The door opens up. We draw down on the guy who was actually the victim coming back through, that got it going. But I remember when I was in special ops, again, I was fortunate enough to be part of a rescue, that was about 3 or 4 miles offshore, and a fishing boat went between a tugboat and a barge, and there's a long steel cable that goes between the two of them. It's called a hawser line.
Yeah.
And the mariner, the recreational fishing vessel, they did not recognize or see or understand the navigation lights, because again, you're out 4 miles offshore in the middle of the night. We called it the inkwell. You can't see anything, right? You have to recognize what the mariner lights are. So they tried to go between the barge and the tugboat, hit the hawser cable, and it flips their vessel. And it was kind of sinking. It was stuck there by the V berth. And we get the call. It was about, I don't know, 10, 11 o'clock on an October night. We fly out. And again, I had about 6 or 7 minutes to kind of think about the whole thing as we got there
Yeah.
and got on scene, and just knew that I was like, this was one of the ones that I don't know if we'll ever come back from. I remember saying to my partner, I actually wrote about it in my book. I remember saying to him, I was like, I don't want to do this, but we have to. And the look that he gave, he was like, let's go do it, man. Like there was no hesitation. And I said, this is what we're paid to do. Because again, that boat was just kind of stuck there. And then by the time we got underneath it and stuff to, get the victims, we didn't know if it was going to take us down to the bottom of the ocean. So
You went under it in the water?
oh yeah. We
Oh
deployed from
my
the
gosh.
yeah, deployed from the aircraft full scuba. And then I learned the lesson literally on my first night in that unit, where the senior guy to me, we had a similar job, overturned boat. And it's like, all right, get underneath there and get the people out, blah, blah, blah. And I start to go underneath the vessel, and the senior guy grabs me, pulls me back, and he shakes his finger like this on the water. And he goes, no, 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 no. And he points to the rail. We work from the rail, So, kind of put this way, there's a way for us to get out. So that younger guy, who's awesome, did the same thing. But I remember that lesson that night. I was like, I grabbed him, bring him back. And then we were working to get bodies out of there and stuff like that. And then we got one or two, I don't remember what it was, and then put them into we surfaced, put them into the basket, go up. We get retrieved, and then it came back out. And then by the time our teammates got there in the boat, and they went underneath and got the rest of the people out. But that was one of them, I think, definitely that I look back, and again, because there was time.
Yeah.
It wasn't, it just popped off for a little bit. It was one of those things that there was time, and it's like, okay, you're playing in your mind what you need to do, but also how to mitigate that risk. And the risk was substantial. And then there was another time I remember, Hurricane Sandy, where we were out the night the storm came ashore. We were on land, and because of the maritime background, they had us on land, and we got deployed. There was no radio communication. Everything we got was from like a headquarters on paper, because all the radio communication was down. Couldn't talk to anybody, nothing. There's nothing we can do. So my partner and I that night, again, we went out. That was one of those nights again where it was like, I don't know if we're coming back, based on everything that was kind of going on there. But again, what I kind of equate that to was the amount of time that we had. It wasn't like it just popped off right in front of you. There was no time to think.
Yeah.
We kind of had time to think as we went into that, which I think is unusual, in the police world, because a lot of times, it just kind of, pops off like that. And they're unusual. It's not like a search warrant that I did at the end of my career and stuff where, there's the kind of lead up to that, but you've got, hopefully they kind of go according to plan, but those other maritime rescues that, the water has a mind of its own, it gets to vote as well.
God bless you, man. Thank God there are guys willing to do that. That to me, that makes the hair in the back of my neck stand up. Going like at nighttime, I'm certified in scuba, but like nighttime, going between like two ships or going under a ship at night, trying to get people out. Because also when people are alive still, they're desperate. So like they're grabbing your regulator out of your mouth. Like that's terrifying, man. That took a lot of courage to do that.
But again, like, I don't sit here and say that, yes, we were courageous. We did our job. And I think anybody in our unit that night would have done the same job. And I think as you get into those special operations realms, that's where those testing standards come in, and we have to adhere to them, because you need to know that there's nobody coming for us. We're 4 miles offshore in a helicopter. It's me and him. It's me and the other dude, that's it. So, it's not somebody's father's chief's uncle put him there, kind of thing. It's like, right. You have to be able to do that.
It's all merit based. You got to be able to do the job.
It was. We had one guy in the history of my career that, he got put into a pickle. And then he said, you know what, that's kind of enough for me. He did his job. And then he said after that, that it wasn't really the unit for him to be in, and kudos to him,
Yeah,
kudos
totally.
To him. But, it's, I think again, I credit all of law enforcement that does this every day in and day out. I happen to be recognized for it, where so many other people in the profession don't get recognized.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. in New York City, how does it work? Do you guys is there a harbor master department? Do you have a harbor master? Or is that all just within the police department?
That was us, right? So we fell under the harbor unit. We were a subunit of that called the scuba team. And then we maintained and drove our own vessels. And then we always had two guys on the aircraft assigned to the aviation unit. And then we were able to either deploy full scuba or rescue gear, et cetera, anywhere within the city in 8 minutes on the helicopter. So that was more proactive. If you were assigned to the boat, it was more of another rescue and recovery mission where, a car goes into the water. I mean, the helicopter responded to that too. But if you weren't able to find them immediately, the boat would take over that operation for the next, 1-2 days, couple hours, whatever it was. Evidence that goes into the water, guns, ATMs, cars, the boat would find that stuff. All of the, counterterrorism, proactive, underwater searches on the critical infrastructure, like for explosive devices. So like I said, I spoke a lot of languages. EOD was not really one of them, but we would recognize an anomaly of what, could be a limp mine attached to a critical infrastructure. So that's primarily what we did. So not that I would ever compare us to the fine men of Air Force Pararescue, but we were a similar mission. That we were more of a rescue mission with a tactical capability, where the ESU guys, our SWAT team that were land-based, that's their primary mission. We had that ability, but that was not our primary mission.
Gotcha. Yeah. Wow. I mean, how do you even know how many divisions are in NYPD? Like how many specialty divisions?
It's a great question.
Like 150?
There's well more than that. There's hundreds. There's got to be 300 or 400 at least. Into different units and subunits. And I mean, there has to be literally hundreds.
Wow. That's crazy, man. George, do you have a positive or heartwarming encounter from when you were on the job?
I do. I was fortunate to rescue a lot of lives, in that unit. And people often ask, they say, what's it like? And there was only one person that ever came back to us and thanked us. And he was actually a New York City fireman. He was out on a windsurfer. And I remember the day because it was so windy, right? Like if we have to go up in the aircraft, it's super choppy, it's windy, it's just not enjoyable. And it was just super windy, watching people windsurf and stuff off of like Coney Island. And then for whatever reason, the wind literally died to zero. And I guess he was far enough offshore, he never made it back in. And then like hours and hours later, we got the 911 call that said, hey, they're looking for a windsurfer. He's offshore, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and by the way, he's an off-duty firefighter, right? And I think that was one of those things that said, this ups the ante for us. We'll do it for anybody, but right. Now it's a firefighter, so there's, we're 110% now. We actually able to find him. We deployed, put him in the helicopter, brought him back. And then he came back to the unit a couple of days later, because again, he was a fellow responder rescuer. So he knows what it's like. He was just like, hey guys, thank you, blah, blah, blah. So, I was fortunate enough to save many lives over my career. Lost quite a few as well. But, that was one that sticks out in my mind that says, hey, fellow rescuer, thank you.
Yeah, that's really cool. I hope there was a fair amount of ball busting going on because the police department had to save a firefighter type of deal.
There always is. And New York City's got a crazy rivalry where I don't know if that rivalry exists everywhere else, but in New York City, it's a very special rivalry. If you've ever seen the NYPD FDNY hockey game, right? You go to a fight and a hockey game breaks out. There's fights in the stands. It's really, and they have to separate the fans in the stands. PD's on one side, FD's on the other side because it gets that heated. So it can get very heated between the fire department and the police department. However, what I will always say is that at the end of the day, it's like two brothers fighting each other, and that no one else can pick a fight with one of us because the other group will always be there to have their back. So there is that sibling rivalry, I would say, but when the NYPD for itself, for example, 2020, 2021 was kind of going through that tumultuous civil unrest time, the FDNY would, fly different flags and show support of the NYPD. And I think that's
Nice.
unlike anything else. So there is definitely a sibling rivalry there, but no one else gets to pick on the other one because you've got the entire other agency to come to rescue them or
Yeah.
help them, whatever.
Yeah, that's great. So it's pretty healthy. And how big is the fire department? How many people do they have? Do you know?
I think they're about 8 or 10,000, from what I mean. I think they're the biggest fire department in the nation as well, or pretty close to it. But they're about 8 or 10,000.
Wow. Damn, man. I can't imagine the budgets for those two departments. That's gotta be the main thing.
The NYPD, it's billions of dollars.
Yeah.
It's billions of dollars. Yeah.
Dang, man. Wish I had just a little piece of that for my little department. Sweet. Get me an air wing.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. So I just want to ask you a little bit about the training for the air wing and the diving. I imagine when you're in a unit like that, like your downtime is probably just spent training, right? Like just recertifying and training, or are you on, like, you're dedicated to that unit, right? You're not like on another post and then respond into that.
No,
unit.
you were assigned to it. So you're either on the boat, and that minimum manning was usually 3 or 4 people. We were at our own 55-foot boat. We had smaller Zodiacs and ribs and stuff like that as well. And then there's always 2 people assigned to the aircraft, 24 hours, 24/7, 365. If you're on the aircraft, there would be some type of training sometimes based on like helicopter deployments, and they would coordinate that. But again, like that is a rapid response anywhere in the city, anywhere in the boroughs within 8 minutes. If you were on the boat, there was typically more training going on. And that training was typically, people in the water doing different types of dives. And typically it was those counterterrorism proactive dives on critical infrastructure. Like pick a critical infrastructure in the city, a bridge, a seawall for the UN, for example, UN General Assembly, right? That whole has to get searched. I won't get into the details of what goes on there, but that gets searched, it gets secured, with boats and foot posts on the land and on the water. So you can now it's swept, it's clean. And now you're going to maintain that environment, right? That sterile environment moving forward. So that was usually what was going on. But more often than not, it was really it was maintaining fitness, that you had to be very fit in order to do that. Because, if you were on the boat or the helicopter, you deployed in the water, it's very dynamic. The currents in the city will run at least 3 knots. Sometimes at max, it could be 5, maybe even 6.
Oh, I
So
bet you get gassed fast out there.
yeah, I mean, but you got to work with it, you work with it, but that means having to be able to put yourself and a victim up onto a boat between a seawall so people don't get crushed, blah, blah, blah. Like it's very, very dynamic. So there's a lot of guys on the team that have significant athletic talents and ability. I'll put it up from state champ swimmers and wrestlers and cyclists and all Americans and this, that, and the other thing. And recon Marines and pararescue men that have come through and stuff. So, they were typically you had to be very fit. Right. And that was the barrier to entry. And then from there, I was always told from the guy who trained me, we'll turn you into a PD frogman.
Very cool. Was there an obstacle course or battery of tests you had to take to get in?
Yeah. So it was our test. Our final test is like on the first day. So you have to show up ready to pass it. And I think when I took it, you had to do 12 pull-ups as a minimum. And if you didn't hit the minimum, you went home. Right. And then next it was push-ups and sit-ups. And, I took it with, let's say 80 people. And then as time wore on, there was less rest because there was fewer people. So you do that. There was a mile run in 6.5 minutes or something like that.
Wow.
Full competency. I think the thing for us too, we would call it the gauntlet at the end when you're all spent was, the senior guy, you went into the deep end of the pool with your stuff on. And then it was really a harassment exercise that you'll see, I will never compare us to buds. We're clearly not that, but where you get harassed underwater, with your stuff coming off, et cetera. So we create a similar environment to that where it's a harassment exercise, and just sit there and take it, and then get your stuff back on. If you break the surface, you go home. So it was kind of spread out like that. And then you had to take a written test as well, just to make sure you knew dive physiology. And then, chances are you'll get picked up.
Gotcha. And would they certify you in diving if you didn't already have it, or do you have to have it coming in?
You already had to have it. So you had to have a prerequisite of like basic open water, and then they'll take you through like the dry suit specialties, the ice specialties, full face mask specialties, etc. But bare minimum, you had to have, just an open water certification.
Man, I grew up on Cape Cod and I was in the water my whole life. I'm comfortable in the water, but I got certified in diving 20 years ago now. And I did find it kind of hard. This is just the NAUI basic thing. But he brought us to a pond and we went down like 30 or 40 feet. And he had us take our masks off and do a roll and then put our masks back on and clear them. I almost panicked. Like I was having that, like, I'm in my 20s. I didn't have any, like, really anything to compare a panic to or a panic attack. But when I did that roll, just that one roll, I felt because I couldn't see. Right. So I couldn't see. I did the roll. All of a sudden I'm sucking oxygen down. I'm trying to clear my mask like they taught us. It's all foggy. I can't see. Dude, it bugged me out. That was like, I felt that claustrophobia, like I was going to drown. I was like, man, I would not be a good frogman.
The unique thing about, I'm sure most public safety divers, it's black water, so like when you hit the bottom, everything that we ever looked for, with the exception of explosives that can be attached to something, is on the bottom. So you have to go to the bottom and get negative. And it was just basically, we would say, get negative, grow a set of balls and start crawling through the mud. Right. And then sometimes you end up face to face with a dead guy because you can't see. But you have to be able to feel. So like, zero visibility, 95% of the time. There are exceptions, like the Hudson, you had zero visibility 6 inches below the surface because it was like chocolate milk all the time.
Oh, gosh.
But depending on where you were, like my big rescue offshore, we had visibility because it was the ocean, and it was an incoming tide and it was fresh water. But, so we had visibility that night. But, public safety diving is an entity unto itself.
Yeah, it's not like diving in the Caribbean where it's fun. You can see 300 feet. Oh man. Yeah, that the water's kind of like that off Cape Cod. There are different times of years, or like you said, if you hit an incoming tide or something, it can be clear. But a lot of the times, like you'd go diving and the whole day was kind of for naught. You'd go down and be like, this kind of sucks. I can see 5-10 feet in front of me, and it's just not fun. Yeah, like unless you're going for lobsters, looking for the little, the claws sticking out. That's fun because you're going to eat good, but definitely not the Caribbean. George, really popular question on the show. A lot of people who listen are like in backgrounds, or they're thinking about being police officers, applying to be police officers. I get emails from people from around the country with pictures from them at graduation because they listened to your guys' stories and they decided to do the job. What advice would you give to these people who are looking into it or who have applied?
It's a great question. So what I will say, and I had a very charmed career. It's the highest of highs and it's the lowest of lows. The mistakes that I made early on was kind of that know-it-all attitude where, seniority is a thing when you first kind of get started. You got to respect that person's time on the job. Doesn't mean that they're good at it, but you need to kind of respect that pecking order. And I was a little bit overzealous and boisterous, kind of not knowing my place. And even if I was right, it really didn't matter as much, but that was a reputation that I kept for a period of time that took me a while to kind of get rid of. Right. And I really had to get out of patrol and into special operations where they said, okay, it's very different now, but learned my lesson early. And then it was basically one of those things. It's, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Ask questions, and go to people for advice, etc. Or if you're struggling with something, struggling mentally or struggling with a question on a job, whatever it might be, go to somebody, but you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great advice. You do get people who come in, and maybe now, even more now, that can't shut up when they're new. And they have all kinds of suggestions for someone who's been on the job 20 years. And it's like, dude, read the room, brother. Just zip it. you know,
You might be right. And you might be right. Maybe you do have a real good way to do something else, because the answer is not always this is the way we've always done it, so it's the right way. I don't
absolutely.
believe in that at all. But I don't believe in that at all. But you've got to really kind of find that finesse between what opinion you want to do versus or want to make a suggestion for versus what's been going on, right? You just don't really have the bandwidth of an experience, at least in my experience. I didn't have the bandwidth of experience to make those suggestions in the manner that I made them. Perhaps if I had gone about it differently and said, hey, I thought about doing it this way, you do it that way, what's the difference? Rather than, hey, why don't we do it this way? That's kind of it can be a challenge.
Yeah.
It can be, especially if people have been doing it for a long time. It's, all right, we got another class of rookies, blah, blah, blah. And you deal with it from there. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's all the approach, and I think whenever I really wanted to say something when I was real junior, I would always like maybe say it not in the group to a senior guy, be like, and I would pose it like a question, like, would it ever work to like do it this way? Or is that a bad idea? Like, even if I knew it was a real good idea, I would kind of pose it kind of like, I was just thinking about this. And, sorry for even asking the question, just to not trigger any kind of.
And I got one more piece of advice I'll actually give them to, and take as much training as you can get. So you'll see that out of a group of cops, there are a third of them that will go to training if the agency sends them. A third of them will pay for training on their own, and a third that want nothing to do with training whatsoever at all. Okay. I was the type of person that if I wanted that training, I would have to pay for it myself if the agency was going to send me. And I think post career, that is some of the reasons I've had the opportunities that I've had, right? Like Mira Safety, for example, because I put myself into a position to get additional training. And A, you become better at that topic. B, you also increase your professional network, which becomes valuable post career. So as you kind of get started, not fast forwarding the clock and wishing your kids' lives away because you want to get to the end of the rainbow at 20 or 25 years, but take those opportunities, keep track of them, throw them in a binder, and take as much training as you can get, because somewhere down the line, it will become valuable.
That is great advice. And I've not heard that a lot on here. That is fantastic advice. And there is a thing where guys, especially in like places with real strong unions, they get kind of wrapped up in the like, they ain't paying, I ain't doing it. But what if it's a class? Say it's like a class like accident recon or some class that like, dude, this has real world value. And if you get into the specialty and the price of entry is just a little bit of your own money, like you're just hurting yourself. But people really do get into the whole, they get defensive against the department, and they don't want to put an ounce of their own flesh in at all, because I don't need to, you need to provide it. That type of us versus them attitude,
I could not agree more with that. Like that statement, like if they're not going to provide, I'm not doing it. And again, not to, go down a resume for me, but I've worked on movies. I've traveled all over the world teaching and training. I've had so many opportunities because, yeah, I can do that for you. Yeah, I can do that for you.
Right.
And if I was the guy that said, well, they're not going to send me, so I'm not going to go, or I don't want to go at all for whatever reason, I don't even know if you know, but I was the guy who trained Keanu Reeves for John Wick. I'm some just regular
That's awesome
cop that ended up with a tremendous opportunity because of a professional network and my ability, So those are the types of opportunities that for me have been very, very valuable. And I can't say enough about the training that I received with the department and then outside of the department, and then working on that professional network, maintaining a solid reputation, to me has been the most valuable thing in the world.
All right, George, you said Keanu Reeves, so we just need a little bit. What were you training him on, and what was he like? By all accounts, everybody loves the guy.
So very easy, right? So I taught him CQB, and then I taught him live firearm transitions between rifles, pistols, all that stuff. The thing that most people like, and I only started telling the story very recently. Again, it was based on a professional network of, different people that I, ran around with. So it was my second movie. I was in Transformers 2, and that's kind of how I ended up with this one, right? I was a special category extra in that, kind of worked my way through that. And then the guy that I ended up working for was literally the man in Hollywood. And that was being filmed on the East Coast. So we put him through all of this training to get to where you see him go to Taron Tactical. Taron Tactical, completely different level. He was not there when I got him. I won't pretend to say that. But what everybody likes to hear is the Wick flick. So where that came from was Keanu and I were
Like flicking the magazine out?
The Wick flick, right? That Wick flick. So after we would do a string of fire and we would be reloading magazines, the range safety officer would go out there and take a couple, spins on his gun or whatever, just to shoot for fun. And then he was doing this thing. And then Keanu was like, well, what is that? What is that? And I said, time out. I go, we don't do that. I go, development group doesn't do that, which is kind of how I ended up there. Special forces doesn't do it. We don't do it. Like if it was a thing, like I would know about it. And these are the reasons why we wouldn't do it. Okay. Time, vision, blah, 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 all these different things. So Keanu kept saying to him, well, show me how to do that. Show me how to do it. I said, listen, this is a dumb idea. The rest is history, right? I told him not to do it for the.
We're having to tell guys at the range now not to do it because they're all trying it.
They're all trying it. And I would get guys in my class that would do it. And I would say to them, I go, do you want to know where that came from? And it's completely random, right? Like I'm happened to be the guy that was there when he learned how to do it. And I told him, no, don't do it. But cinematically, does it look cool? Yes, it looks cool. But it was one of my second film, at the time. So I was pretty, I don't want to say naive. I was very reserved in my approach with him. Not that I would have forced him never to do that, but I mean, I was kind of like very professional. As I kind of worked longer, I got, I'm more of a friendly footing with a lot of the actors. So He was completely professional. He was cordial, but again, I usually say that about most of the actors that we have worked with over our career, because they come to us for skills in order to put them on camera, and we're hired by the production company. So they know really, the weight that we carry. So I've never had a hard time with any of the actors that I've worked with.
Yeah. They want to learn it so they can not look the fool. Yeah. So that flick thing, like it kind of makes sense. Cause like with Glock, they're coated in polymer, and when the magazine's empty, Glock trains you when you go to their training schools to strip the magazine, pull my headphones off, to strip the magazine because it doesn't just fall out sometimes. So I was thinking like maybe he was doing the flip because they're plastic magazines or something.
The guy that said it to him, that range safety officer, had said, well, if there's mud, if it's stuck, whatever, you can do it. Yes, in theory, it works. Okay.
Right.
But at the end of the day, what I'm doing is I'm moving now out of my workspace. It's increasing the amount of time, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
What I tell people is like, if I wanted to reload a magazine without, or reload a handgun without even looking, right? Like I can prove it to you right now. Here's my gun, here's my middle finger, and I can put it in there every time, So there's a reason why we don't do it. We're moving things out of our workspace, blah, blah, blah. But on film, does it look cool? Yes. I am the guy that said, don't do that.
Yeah, you could also throw a magazine in the air and then turn your gun upside down and have the magazine go right in. I mean, you could train that. Yeah. That's awesome, George. What a cool story, man. I'm glad that came up. All right, brother. You thank you so much. You've great job answering those questions, man. It's been a fun interview so far. You mentioned your book. I'm glad you mentioned it because I totally forgot to say it during the intro. But tell us a little bit about that.
So yeah, I wrote a book just a couple of months ago and self-published it. It's on my website, and that story, my offshore story, was in there. And again, I like to give credit where credit's due to so many other men and women that wear a uniform every day and that actually don't get recognized. So I was a Medal Day recipient. The people that are in my book were other Medal Day recipients for Combat Cross, Medal of Honor, Medal for Valor. And it's my connection to them. So I work with every one of them that was in there, all different stories. Some I was aware of their story. Some I was present at their story. Others I had just heard about their story and worked with them at some point, throughout my career. So that actually is, every chapter in there is about a different, quote unquote story that went to Medal Day.
That's awesome, man. And But some of your stories are in there as well, not just other people's.
Yeah, the last chapter is mine. It's called Ambrose Channel, but the first chapter really was one of my buddies. I was in the aircraft when his shooting happened. It was this giant, wild shooting in Brooklyn. The sergeant shot, passed out, and they threw everybody in the car. It's just wild, just absolutely wild. And I was over his incident in the aircraft as it was happening. He hadn't come to the unit yet, and then he ended up coming to the unit as a pilot a couple of years after that incident. So, that was the first one in there. Other ones are, different people that I worked with throughout my career, different rescues and shootings. There's two guys in there where the towers came down on them. I wasn't there for that part, obviously, but I worked with them later in my career. But two different unique stories from emergency service unit, where the towers actually basically came down on those guys. They survived. Unfortunately, there was a lot of people that didn't that day.
Yeah. Wow. Sounds amazing, man. So GeorgeSichler.com is where to get it right now. And I'll put the link in the show notes so people can just click on it. George, tell us a little bit about Mira Safety.
Yeah. So they brought me on board really as a phenomenal company, and
huge social media presence on Instagram. I was shocked.
Yeah, huge. So, and I think we just dropped an episode yesterday. I do a lot of YouTube content for them and Instagram content for them too. And we just dropped an episode last night about shooting in a gas mask and stuff. So, primarily, we do a lot of direct to consumer in the preparedness space. So not just gas masks, but general preparedness and safety. And it's one of those tools that, you should have earlier than before you think you actually need it.
Yeah.
And because we spoke the CBRN language from special operations, and I have a bit of a business background as an entrepreneur over the last handful of years, I came on board, and we've been doing great things ever since.
That's awesome, man. Very cool. And like you said, that 20-year career in NYPD, risking your ass, is at least paying off a little bit in retirement,
It did. And it goes back to, again, the training. So patrol, I think I was saying, in the green room before that, patrol level law enforcement anywhere gets that minimum baseline of, situational awareness, chemical training. Special ops, we went a little bit above that, and it had to do with, like you were saying, after 9/11, we got different gas masks, escape hoods. And then they needed somebody on the team to go to hazmat technician school. So I went to that because at the time I was running around with a guy on my own time who came out of Naval Special Warfare Development Group. And he created their CBRN decon, tactical capability for them. And we kind of hit it off. And actually, he's the reason why I ended up in the movie business. So like going all the way back then,
like dominoes.
It was just about, professional networking and maintaining a good reputation and saying yes and saying, I want to learn more and don't know where it's going to lead to at some point. But that's really how I ended up at Mira, because I had this more than base knowledge, more than just the special ops knowledge of CBRN because of who I was, associating with then and still do now.
Very cool, man. Well, George, I've taken up about an hour of your time now. It was an honor to have you on. Thank you so much for coming, brother.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
And I will, I'm just going to do the outro to the show now. Can you hang on for just like 2 minutes?
Can do.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, the great George Sichler, fantastic stories and super interesting to hear all about NYPD like that. What a beast of an agency. So cool. George's book, a link to George's book will be in the show notes. It's on his website, GeorgeSichler.com. And also a link to Mira Safety will be on there. I believe there's a discount code for the podcast if you want to purchase. I think it's 10% off. I believe it's TPS 10. I believe that's what I saw, but just check the notes just to confirm, but I believe that's what it is. It will be in the show notes 100%. This is a time in the show when I thank the Patreon sponsors, people that keep the lights on, they keep the boat afloat. I truly, truly appreciate it. So if you heard all the free content and you really loved it and you want to give old Gingy a couple of your shekels, I'll take them. You can pick through different levels, but if you pick Sergeant or above, you will get a shout out on the show. I'm going to be starting with the lieutenants. Who I'm talking about is a great and powerful Andy Biggs. Kyle Roberts, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Kyle. Oh, crap. They changed the format, guys. I can't read anybody's last names. This is no good. Oh, boy. I'm going to do my best. Give me a second. Give me 1 second. Brad Thompson, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Brad. Michael Roach, Roach Machines. Thank you. Lane Campbell. I'm remembering people's last name. The great Gary Steiner. Thank you. Adam Mihal, my man. Thank you. Seth Wright. Lauren Stimson. Jason Lau. Sasha McNabb, everybody. Tammy Walsh. Hold it down, dispatch. Thank you, Tammy. George Tessier. Love you, buddy. See you at church. Dennis Carrasquillo, my man. Thank you. Scott Young. Thank you, sir. Dan Carlson from Burley Boards. Check him out on Instagram. Amazing woodworker. Doug and Kelly Newman. Thank you. Raymond Arsenal. Thank you, good sir. Sergeant Raymond Arsenal. Richard Tolles. Keep on trucking, my man. Thank you, sir. Elliot Sykes, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Clark LaCuff. Thank you. Adam, I don't remember your last name. Adam Mihal? I think that's it. Adam Mihal, thank you, my man. Sheriff Ronald Long, thank you. Zachary Pleat, thank you. Jason Labrie, the great Jason Labrie, thank you. Lisa Gano, thank you. Madame, the great Sherry Finch, thank you, Sherry. Eric Smith, my man. Thank you. Jackson Dalton from Black Box Safety. Check them out. Thank you, Jackson. Brett Lee, Alex Wasick, Lauren Smith, Yvonne Truelove, Becky. You got a tough last name and your email does not have it in it. Becky, I'll get you next time. I got to figure this out. Thank you, Becky. Gina Kimmy, I think. Thank you, Jimmy. Gina Kimmy, I love you. Josiah, thank you so much. Guys, I will figure that out for next time. It's one of those deals where the company changed the format of the website, and I haven't looked at it in like a week, and they truncated all your names, so I got most of them from memory, which is unbelievable to me to begin with. I'm quite impressed with myself. All that to say, I love you guys, and I will see you next time.